Yeah, I know. Hello, everyone. How are we doing? Are we alive?
You were afraid to talk because of the delay.
What was that?
I was afraid to talk because of the recording. I just said shh.
Oh. No. Well, welcome to a celebration of literature and living writers. My name is Megan Marshall. I'm the director of the Hugh C. Hyde Living Writers series. And tonight we're going to be kicking off our celebration of National Poetry Month, just a little bit early, a couple weeks, with a wonderful poet who is going to make us forget all about our mid-semester exhaustion. No pressure, Matthew. But before I introduce him officially, I want to thank those who have helped to make this event and this series possible. That includes all of our friends at Love Library, my fabulous co-host, Michael Tumlin. Also, I want to thank Laurel Bliss, Rebecca Williamson, and Tammy Luca Hall. I also want to thank the Department of English and Comparative Literature for their continued support of this series, as well as instructionally related activities, and Michael Ramirez and all of our friends who are selling books over there in the corner. And lastly, I am honored to acknowledge this space that we are privileged to share. For millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been a part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations. And as members of the SDSU community, we acknowledge and celebrate this legacy. All right, lastly, if you haven't done so already, if you could silence your cell phone, please. And then know, as you heard, the event is being recorded, but don't worry, all we see is this place here. All right, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our featured guest author. Matthew Zapruder is the author of 6 collections of poetry. Most recently, I Love Hearing Your Dreams, which he'll share from tonight, as well as 2 books of prose, Why Poetry, and Story of a Poem. His poems, essays, and translations have appeared in many publications, including Harper's, Baum, Slate, American Poetry Review, Tin House, Paris Review, The New Yorker, McSweeney's, and the Los Angeles Times. His work has also appeared in many anthologies, including Third Rail, The Poetry of Rock and Roll, Legitimate Dangers, American Poets of the New Century, and several years of Best American Poetry. His awards include a 2011 Guggenheim Fellowship, a Lannan Foundation Residency Fellowship, and the May Sarton Prize from the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Matthew is editor-at-large at Wave Books, where he edits contemporary poetry, prose, and translations. And from 2016 to 2017, he held the annually rotating position of editor of the poetry column for the New York Times Magazine, and was the editor of Best American Poetry 2022. He teaches in the MFA in creative writing at St. Mary's College of California. In a recent interview with Guernica, when asked about the constant need to defend poetry as a vocation, Matthew stated, "I personally believe the role of poets as poets, which is something different from our obligations as citizens, community members, humans, is to write poems. I believe this because I am quite sure poetry can do something no other form or writing or human activity can, at least not in such a powerful and distilled and undeniable way. And that we need this type of thinking for our survival as individuals and as a species. In our current moment, where opportunities to think, write, and speak divergently may be under threat, perhaps we need poetry and poets like Matthew more than ever to acknowledge, like the various speakers in I Love Hearing Your Dreams, that we cannot trust the central metaphor, which is we are children, though it is true we are not safe anywhere. To mourn and lament, it seems these days every poem is a failed elegy for the world, but also to celebrate and hope. The little candle, quiet and anxious, on its own, just went out, then started reaching for something again. If nothing else, I think poetry can provide that space for us to see and be seen and to be in connection with each other and with community. So we're so lucky to have Matthew Zapruder here as part of our SDSU community tonight. So please join me in giving him a very warm welcome.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, everybody. It's always like an honor to visit a community devoted to art and literature and thinking clearly. And so, you know, I feel very honored and privileged to speak to you tonight. And so I will be reading mostly from this book of poems that Megan mentioned, and maybe some new work, depending on how things are going. And but I do also, I was thinking about the fact that this is a reading for not just poets, you know, prose writers. And so I was thinking that maybe I'd actually just start with a tiny bit of a few pages of prose from the book that came out before this most recent book of poems, which is called A Story of a Poem. Story of a Poem. There's no A in it. It's a book where I basically set this task for myself to write one poem as slowly as I could and to write about the writing of a poem. So I thought that might be interesting to just sort of really try to slow down and think about what I was doing and write about the revision process. But I ended up writing a lot about my life too when I was doing it. And so, but this little passage is mostly about writing, because this is, you know, a group of writers, and hopefully some of this will contextualize what I'm going to do next. Each time I sit down to write a poem, I don't know what I'm doing. Even after all these years, this can still be uncomfortable. I was trained practically from birth to succeed, to know what I'm doing, to have plans and goals, and to achieve whatever it is I set out to do. It's difficult to hold inside myself the idea that the only way to find out what I really need to say is to let go, which I never really know exactly how to do. Sometimes it can help to have a loose idea of what I want to write about, though from experience I've come to realize this is certain to change. Often it's just a desire to see what happens if I start playing around with a certain word. What sorts of things will come up? It's probably more than anything just about as incautious and idealess as groping in the dark with a paperclip, looking to stick it into an electrical outlet. Desperately still, each time I search in books, memories, dreams, dictionaries, conversations, the natural world, anywhere, there's either actual language or the possibility of language being generated by experience. The more open I am to the experiences, the better. A lot of the way I work in writing poems is to select words and images, phrases, ideas, and so forth through intuition, then to start to construct something from those selections. Sound is a huge guiding force, though not in any systematic way. It's just part of the attraction I feel, an attraction that sometimes becomes atavistic, but if it survives through the composition process, reveals itself as significant. Put the headlamp on. I found myself one day saying to my students, go down into the fearful dark, search for some glow, grab it, and bring it back up. Then, unlike the miner, instead of turning it over to some gemologist, clear off the debris yourself. Do whatever is necessary to make it ready. Be your own jeweler. Set it, through trial and error, into the proper structure where it can be seen. The ultimate purpose is not to alter the treasure, but to put it into the world so it can be marveled at. Not as something you made, but as something you discovered that belongs to all of us. So this book is called I Love Hearing Your Dreams, which is kind of funny because, you know, I spent a lot of my life saying I didn't like hearing people's dreams. And my wife loves to talk about her dreams. She's one of those people who loves to talk about her dreams, like any excuse, like, you know, yeah. And I just was like, yeah, there was a lot of eye rolling going on, which maritally, I don't advise eye rolling with your partner. But anyway, but I realized that like actually my attitude was bad because I mean, yes, there's something a little tedious about hearing someone's dreams sometimes because, you know, they kind of like have no point or whatever, but they're actually so weirdly intimate it's like a way of somebody sharing actually like this very raw aspect in themselves. You know, and so it's actually something that when I thought more about it, I was like, it's just I feel like if we really were interested in each other's dreams, like for real, like this would be a much better world to live in because we would really be listening to each other like on a very unmediated way, you know. And so I changed my attitude, not just for marital reasons. That'd be reason enough. So the book title became "I Love Hearing Your Dreams," but meaning everybody's dreams. Obviously, you know, in this poem, it's my wife is the you, but really, like so often in poems, the you is stands in for everybody. You know, it's like you who are listening, you a big you. So, or I hope it functions that way. So. This is one of those poems also that does that very advanced move of like the title like runs right into the poem, and don't try this at home, you know, it could be dangerous, you could slip. So anyway, so that's how it goes. I love hearing your dreams. Like those poems I write in my sleep and forget. The ones that babble some essential message to the trees I can only walk toward in that particular dark I see when I turn away from the world. Returning, I always forget my best work. Like those forgotten poems, your dreams have no hidden agenda to be wise. They're made to be forgotten, so something can be known. Tonight, I was woken by a light passing along our shade. I heard you cry out. You would not stop until I gently shook you. Your eyes in the ordinary light through the window were still yours, yet you wore a distant face, not like a mask at all. Before you spoke, your face became a sun, an animal, a chair. You looked as if you just discovered you were holding keys to a lake. You could still hear your parents laughing. They were not yet married. On your face, things kept turning into each other, pages left in the wind. Then I heard you say, it was the strangest thing. So I write a lot about my family, my kid, my wife. And, you know, I've written lots of poems that are kind of, you know, directly about, you know, them. But sometimes, you know, I find that if you like, you need to write away from something to get to it. I don't know if you all have that experience. So sometimes you need to just sing, and that's the only way to understand. So this poem is kind of like a song about my son, I would say. It was summer, the wind blew. It was summer, the wind blew away from me. And I stayed here thinking about a certain mountain. Things got green, then forgot. And in their forgetting, remembered everything that was not grass or me. My son forgot he could not swim, then emerged tall as laughter, hidden as the lesson in a song. He forgot how to tie his shoes, then learned how to draw a face and tie it to a string and run far off into the place only he could go. I chased him, but he just grew larger. For a week, he became a carpenter. Hammering filled my heart. My heart went to the hardware store and bought all the napping spatulas. It was summer, so I let them stay up all night, or they let me. We swung from the magnolia. Our great leaves fell. It remained our friend. Each day was that same sweet holiday that never ended until the windows got soft. It was summer. Candles came on like televisions. That was the last time things were real. So this next poem, I was like, I don't know if you all are ever on social media or not. Probably not, because you're probably smart. You never go on social media, right? I happen to be on social media, particularly like virulent virulent form of social media is editors or just people giving writing advice. I mean, you can be pretty sure that almost anything anyone says on social media about writing is wrong. So they're like, never do this, or you're like, always do that. You know, so I was reading something and there was some editor or assistant editor or something said, you know, I can't read any more poems about grandparents or poems where people say, you know, the real meaning of things in Latin and Greek, you know, like Latin and Greek definitions. And I was like, I'm totally gonna do that right now. So I wrote this poem and like bang, just kind of wrote it right away and just as almost like a joke, but it's like a lot of things that start out as jokes, it kind of turned out to be pretty much central to something that I hadn't realized I was thinking about. So it's called My Grandmother's Dictionary. My Grandmother's Dictionary. It must have arrived in the hands of a salesman whose name shall remain unrecorded. Let's call him the handsome stranger. She saw him through the little window next to the door and knew, although she did not believe she believed in such things, she had loved him in a former life. She gave him a glass of her legendary tea and let him go. My grandfather was upstairs in the immaculate attic, where after they died, I found this typewriter sleeping among old blueprints. During the war, he diagrammed routes so trucks of soldiers could arrive precisely in time to wait for their orders. Or he worked in parts. I don't remember. I can only picture that afternoon he told me exactly who he had been. I hear the resigned tone, but not what he said. I was, as is my nature, staring out the kitchen window, thinking some great hypothesis that could easily be disproved. That day now lost in the book, no one can ever turn around and read. This was in a little town that was a harbor, its restaurant a windmill, replica, turning in no wind. We never asked her why she always stood in the darkest part of any room. Once she looked up from her eternal soup, long enough to say to me, "You really must remove that terrible beard. What is the name of that sort of love? I want to look it up. I think it comes from the Latin, for not knowing the Greek. For the particular quiet of that afternoon, I finally gave in and picked up the forbidden ceramic lion from the shelf. It slipped from my hands that already trembled as they do today and hit the very thick carpet with a silent thud, exploding into so many tiny pieces. Out of the kitchen she came with a broom, and we both pretended it was never there. What is that sort of love? The dictionary knows. I opened it and found dust. I remember it had a solitary gold stripe across blue-gray fabric, like a dress you wear only once by the sea. The first reading I gave from this book, I didn't know why I'm in this whole story. I'm just kidding. The first reading I gave from this book was in the bookstore, like near where I live, and a woman who was clearly a grandma. The first question I got from her was like, "How did your grandma feel about this poem when she wrote?" Like kind of like aggressive, like it's sort of like I was like, "She's been dead a long time, lady," but like yeah, I don't know how she felt. Get the Ouija board out. So this next poem, so I get asked a lot, but like when people ask me about a poem, sometimes they often ask me about punctuation, because often I don't write with punctuation, but often I do actually. And everyone's like, "Why do you never write with punctuation?" I'm like, anyway, so I was like, oh, I'm gonna write a poem, like I'm gonna try to answer this question, you know, in a poem, which of course I utterly failed to answer the question, but anyway, this poem's called Thoughts on Punctuation. Yeah. Thoughts on punctuation. Staple the ghost to the page with your favorite symbol, and you might find out too much or end up prosecuting wind for lack of commitment when it blows the clouds around. Describe the wind with precision. Torture it for a while. It will tell you what you know. Sometimes I see the future is just the past in a suit that will never be in style. It wears your father's trilby, shadowing a face that answers you with a semicolon, linking unrelated facts, like a modern oracle a conglomerate employs. When I rattle on like this, saying useless things are true, such as the Egyptians used marks shaped like cats to divide words, please slap me with a hyphen. Put me back on the shelf next to that old wooden game. It had complicated rules for diagramming our thoughts about who we should become so we could leave them behind. We played it one whole winter, so deeply absorbed we died, then were reborn as commas, happy to go on and on. Is everybody okay?
Yeah.
We're gonna change that. So this poem, so in this book, Story of the poem that I started writing, so basically, I don't want to show you, show and tell. In the book, like I start off writing this poem and I use my typewriter, that I mentioned actually earlier. And so like I start out with like a little draft here, you know, and the two lines I started like in the middle of the page with 2 lines, and the lines were two sleeps, watch over was the first line. So because I was like thinking about how you know, if you're a parent, you absorb this language where you're like, you talk about time in terms of sleeps. I don't know if anybody's a parent, but you're like, it's gonna happen in 3 sleeps. It's gonna happen in 2 sleeps. I don't know. It's just like you start talking like that. You're like, really? Why did I say that? But like, so anyway, so I started off with that, and then, but as the poem went on, that fell out of the poem. It just, that phrase wasn't in there anymore. So when I sent this book, and I sent this book to a poet I revere, Mary Ruffel, who's a friend of mine, and she wrote me back a very lovely note about blah, blah, blah. She said, my one criticism of the book is she says, I really miss that phrase 2 sleeps, which is like kind of like a flatter. It's like super flattering way to criticize me. I was like, I wish all criticism was that flattering. Like, so I wrote her a poem called 2 Sleeps, so, which is in this book. So I'm gonna read that right now. It's called 2 Sleeps and it's for Mary Ruffel. 2 Sleeps. When the other father told his child something will happen in 2 sleeps, at first I didn't understand. He meant something comforting. Time passing with quick ease, a way to measure nights numbered in unearned peace. I just thought of my own 2 sleepers who often waking me, though even in sleep, I'm always already awake at that oddest hour that does not end, the crooked, unnumbered one. Then they fall back into their respective oblivions. I lie shrouded in this barge that does not cross the river, listening. No music of the dead, no wise silence, no penultimate dream. I just worry every particle can now be counted, that we're all caretakers of a dying patient named the self or the sea. I lie here and worry, I'm worrying about all the wrong things. According to some system, I worry I myself created, probably in my sleep. It is very utterly dark. Like a branch in total darkness, I cannot be discerned. All night I stand beneath the tree. Every once in a while I teach the summer program that's near Lake Tahoe. And they have bears there. In this locale, that bears just wander around, bears live and wander around. So they have to warn you, like you go on a hike, they're like, if it's a bear, you know, like what happens if you run into a bear? Because I don't know, I'm a city boy, I don't know what I do. I was born in DC, I don't know. So they're like, you know, if you run into a bear, and like every time they tell you, and like either you're supposed to like pretend to be dead, or you're supposed to like scream at the bear. Like one of the two is like different kinds of bears are supposed to do different things. Like if it's a big, I don't know. like, depends, like which kind of bear. But like, it's super important to know which one, right? Because you don't want to scream at the bear you're supposed to pretend to be dead for, but vice versa, whatever. So, you know, so anyway, so this particular bear, kind of bear, you're supposed to yell at, you're supposed to yell something in their face, and apparently it makes them run away, so. Don't, please don't do that, like I wanna, like, make it outside the waiver, like, don't, so they see me. So, anyway, but it's called, this poem's called Bad Bear, Bad Bear. If you see one, you can say bad bear right to its face, even if you're not sure. Maybe it's good and has discretion in relation to the delicious treasury of human garbage, or even the eternal work of bees. Who knows? But it's okay on the path with your thunder voice, unequivocally to condemn it. Lore says that will make it leave, so you can go tell your story in the tent, and again at the table, laughing without asking, what violence brought you there? You and all that food from everywhere, those flowers you eat, and do not wonder who told you it's okay to lie, even to the rich, or to save a life, even your own. In the middle of night, in the cave, you will hear the eternal question, even darker than what surrounds. Was I born this way? Or was it circumstance that condemned me? Silence answers, you were born to be condemned everywhere but in poems. For a while, you hang dead leaves on the night tree, then they fall away, and all that is left is this honey you stole from the world. Usually read this poem, but I live in the Bay Area, you know, so like everything is all super built up. And I live near this town called Walnut Creek, the WC. And but like it's all big box stores, right? You know, except there's this one building that's a locksmith. This little building that's like, that they like won't move, you know, they won't sell, right? And so I drive all the way out there to get my keys done, because I'm like, hold on, little locksmith, you know? And so anyway, after the last time I did that, I wrote this poem called The Locksmith. It's sort of like from the point of view of the guy, because it's like a family-owned business. So, you know, I was talking to the guy, and it's like he's like the great-grandson of the person who started it or whatever. So it's called The Locksmith. You used to be able to see the mountain from the front window of our store and the railroad track that went north. The train stopped not too far from here and dropped off people who wanted to place their tired bodies in the medicinal waters. The train went on to the timberlands, disappearing into the fog. Now all you can see are buildings, and everything is covered over. No one even knows there used to be a spring with minerals that healed the body's mysterious pains. It still runs under the alley. You can hear it at night. In the shop, no one can easily find. A lot of things aren't useful anymore, but it seems locks will always be just complicated enough. We used to bevel the keys by hand, but it's still an art to use this machine. I hope to die here in this little room, just like my grandfather, who said, here's your receipt, but don't worry. Even though everything has changed, no one has ever returned with a key I carved to open what opens not. I'll read. I'll read a few poems. See how it goes. So it's scary when someone pulls up a sheath. I said I grew up in DC. Yeah, that's where I was a kid. And it's a weird town because it just changes so much, you know, like depending on who's in government. And And but it doesn't, but things about it don't change. Cause it's got this sort of infrastructure. We've all probably all been to Washington DC, right? You know, so like those big white buildings that just dominate everything and they feel like this kind of like landscape of psychic woe. You know, like landscape of psychic woe. That sounds, I don't even know what I mean by that. Okay, okay, this poem is called My Downfall. My Downfall. When I was a child, I never knew which ineffable force shone through my window, so I could read late into the night. I sometimes heard the name of the president, who for our safety could never leave the White Palace. And then a silence through which every day my father walked under the maples downtown to the Capitol building, where he defended the strong. Long ago, I was born in that light that shone through my window, so I could read late into the night, my books of adventure, the light of that dome. Then grew up in it too. In 9th grade English, we wrote odes to the new park. Mine was chosen, so I went and read it to the president, who smiled under his famous hair in that round building, so perfectly lit with absence, and it was there my downfall began. I took the train from the Bay Area up to Truckee, you know, in Tahoe, and you go by Donner Lake, you do that. So, but that's just, you can see this one's still in progress here. This poem's called Dirty Tesla. Why? I mean, I thought it was funny title. So, little did I know, right? Dirty Tesla. On the train, I ride through a cloud. The conductor says, as if to me, there are many opportunities to smoke in Sacramento and then in Reno, which seemed truer than anything. You pass so quickly, said a pine. And now we're passing through a piece of California where people ate each other. I do not resist the urge to say aloud to the lake down there that it sounds like the party got out of hand. Far below, a blue eye regards me not. Speaking of history, Dirty Tesla was the name of someone's band in high school. Don't tell anyone who's not here how some things just get more obvious in their malevolence, while we sit here doing everything with no results. Why are you doing whatever it is? No one knows, except future historians of odes to the final days of future nostalgia, is what I tell myself. Speaking of history, my son attends Beach Elementary, named for the first Californian ever to die in a world war. As soon as the first one started, it already would forever go on. His name was Egbert, followed by a mysterious W. His poor mother stood up so straight in the photograph of the funeral. I don't know if he ever put on one of those striped suits and went to look at the sea before he crossed it. I just know he died in a field near a town called Boney. All this I relate to my love as we walk by the buildings so utterly quiet in summer. It's so sad, she said. Everyone thinks he's a place, but he was a person. We were going as slowly as we could toward the tea shop owned by a friend named Grace, where we would drink chrysanthemums grown in Fresno. I was standing with a couple people, and we, for some reason, someone said the word palanquin, and we were like, we have no idea how to pronounce this word. So we're all like trying to pronounce it right. And everybody was saying palanquin, it's like a little like carriage. And then we were talking, it was poets, so we were talking about how many words, you know, there's these words when you're a kid where you read like, and you don't know how to pronounce them. And then when you say them out loud the first time, you realize you never said them and like how that's embarrassing, but it's actually great because it means that you were like reading, right? So anyway, so we agreed, we made this agreement. Me and Rick Barrett and Victoria Chang were like, we're all gonna write this poem called Palanquin or Palanquin or however you pronounce it, whatever. And I was the only one who did it. If you ever run into them, ask them what their poem is. I say Palanquin, but yeah, Palanquin. When I was a child, I used to read such long books, summer went on forever. My room was filled with trees. A blue river flowed above me at night. I was surrounded by a yellow house. I did not yet know the difference between silences. In the longest one, a king could never be killed because he always rode by himself. In his palanquin, his solitude was his armor. I pronounced it in my mind. On the final page, the war for the emerald had ended, and another loomed. I can't remember if he married the ghost he had seen in the park when he was a boy, or the daughter of the relentless assassin patiently waiting in the sequel. When I say it now, it resounds in my skull. I'm still not sure how it should sound. It's like one of those names you see carved into a stone in those old graveyards you can find in every city if you have enough time. That's like horoscopes, and you're like, oh, so horoscope. But Mercury's always in retrograde, though. Mercury's retrograde. It's opposite. What is it? The opposite of that. Anyway, so my birthday's November 22nd. You know, not too early to start shopping, but November 22nd, which is on the cusp of Sagittarius and Scorpio. For some reason, when I was a kid, I thought I was a Sagittarius. Which, if you know me for 5 seconds, that's obviously not true. I'm obviously not a Sagittarius. I'm obviously a Scorpio. At some point, I had a girlfriend who's this before I met my wife, who was really into astrology, and she did my chart, and she's like, "You're not a Sagittarius, dude, you're Scorpio." And so, anyway, so this is kind of in the context of that discovery. It's called My Inescapable Fate. I tried to write a poem about my astrological sign, and for half my life, I had it wrong. How I thought I was a Sagittarius, which apparently I can't even spell. I was born on the cusp, right at the end of November, and every time I read the paper, I turned to the horoscope and thought, I don't have any coworkers. I'm not forgiving, spontaneous, or fun. I mostly like to sit in my room and think about the Baltimore Orioles, and listen to Aztec Camera and Psychedelic Furs, and imagine I was in a band. Which is, by the way, why U2 is the perfect name. I devoted much time to an endless game, the name of which I've forgotten. The purpose was to teach the player how to explore and colonize the world, which, given the circumstances into which I was born, seems like an unnecessary lesson. One day, someone who loved me asked me exactly when it happened and drew a complex chart, and I was told I belong to the sign known for believing one never belongs. Anyway, I tried to write this poem, but could not escape what I call ancestor sadness. The sense that the more I tried not to lie, the more I did. I guess you could say that was my inescapable fate, but only in the poem I did not show to anyone. I wrote these poems. So, I'll read one more new one, and I'll read one from the book, and then we'll be done. Okay, that sound okay?
Sounds good.
This is called Elegy for Tuesday, and I don't know, since this is a room full of writers, I tried to write this poem for such a long time, and it was like a lot longer, and it was all about me, this poem, and then I realized that I just took out all the parts that were about me, and I was like, oh, this is the actual poem that's right here. So, yeah. Elegy for Tuesday. Elegy for Tuesday. The phone rings and someone tells you another great poet died. Now you have to tell sleep it has lost its most curious denizen. Most of the world doesn't know it's a death mask in a glass case. One cloud says, I was the one who taught her you could start anywhere and end up explaining everything. Another replies, you were just her apprentice of resembling. Yes, it's true, you can read her book and still find the door to the past. And yes, the war survived her, but not her poems, secretly continuing the work of wondering all the wrong things. That could apply to any poet that we've lost. Okay, last poem I'll read is the last poem in the book, and it's called I Don't Know. I don't know. And thank you all again for listening. And the you in this poem again is my wife, but it's also you. And I don't know. The little candle in front of the portrait of your mother flickers with happiness. A river of years flows past your sleeping, lonely form. Every morning, the anxious, quiet, unhelpful phantoms say to me, you've forgotten what feeling is surrounded by glass inside the museum of not knowing, and what the dog is barking at, and why just now I felt sure ghosts caress the infirmary, and where snow starts. I mean, at what point it's snow. And who told me the thing that controls what I do, what that thing is, where is it? I hear them while I'm wandering through the part of morning just before everything explodes. The little candle, quiet and anxious, on its own just went out, then started reaching for something again. Thank you.